They are, I believe, the regional beta tests for a coordinated plan to systematically pry that equity out of your hands.
This is the Epic Real Estate Podcast, contrarian takes on money, housing, and policy without the guru nonsense.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Let's go.
And look, while the news is busy distracting us with the usual political circus, the real story, the one that will actually change your life, is happening in the shadows. Now, you've heard figures like Donald Trump talk about a rigged system or a swamp for years. It's easy to dismiss it as just noise, but what if there was proof? A specific documented plan is being put into motion right now by the financial establishment to solve America's massive $38 trillion debt problem. This isn't about politics. It's about your money, because this plan is how they get out of the colossal bar tab that they've run up by making you pick up the check. It's a plan with a name, the Quiet Default. And now they're preparing a high-tech upgrade to this old playbook, a digital reset designed to fundamentally change the nature of your money. Think of it this way. The government has a debt problem, a massive woke up in Vegas married to a tiger level of debt problem. The normal solutions, spending less or taxing more, are politically unpopular. So they've turned to a strategy that's as brilliant as it is evil: financial repression. Now that sounds complicated, but it's basically this. The federal government and the Federal Reserve work together to make sure the interest you earn on your savings is less than the rate of inflation. So that $100 you proudly put in a savings account, next year it might be $101. But thanks to inflation, what you can buy with it is only worth $97. They're performing a magic trick where your money slowly vanishes into thin air. And the best part is, they get to use that vanished value to pay down their debt. And if you think this is some wild conspiracy theory, you should know this is their go-to move. It's not a bug, it's a feature. This isn't their first rodeo. You see, after World War II, the US had a debt to GDP ratio over 100%, much like today. And how did they fix it? Not with bake sales. They used this exact playbook of financial repression to quietly melt away over 40 percentage points of that debt. So they've done it before, and they're absolutely doing it again. In fact, academic models show that when a country's debt crosses the 100 to 120% of GDP threshold, which we did a decade ago, this becomes the government's optimal strategy. We're currently sitting right now at 124% debt to GDP. We're not approaching the danger zone. We're already in it. And it gets worse because that slow, quiet erosion of your savings wasn't efficient enough for them. Now they're preparing that high-tech upgrade. The next phase of this plan is called tokenization. Wall Street titans like BlackRock CEO Larry Fink are practically salivating over this. He says the future is turning every financial asset, every stock, every bond, every retirement fund into a digital token on a blockchain. And they'll sell it to you as progress and efficiency. And sure, it might make some things move faster, but what it really does is give them a whole new level of control. It's like your power company replacing your old electric meter with a smart one. They'll tell you it's to help you save energy, but what it really means is that they can now turn your AC off remotely during a heat wave. Tokenization is the smart meter for your entire net worth. Once your 401k is just a string of code on a government-adjacent ledger, they can reprogram the rules. That 10-year bond you bought, whoops, a software update just made it a 15-year bond. The value of your digital dollars? A new policy could instantly reduce their value by 20% to stabilize the economy. It's a digital reset button for their debt, and your face is the button. Even a senior advisor to Vladimir Putin has publicly accused the US of planning to use crypto and tokenization to shrink its debt. When Russia is calling out America's debt plan, you know you've got problems. So who's to blame? Well, it's a perfect storm of greed. Politicians spending like there's no tomorrow, the Fed printing money to enable them, and Wall Street building the digital casino to execute the heist. So what can you actually practically do? Because diversify is the kind of useless advice a billionaire gives you from his yacht. So let's be specific. The goal here is to own things they can't easily print, program, or digitally seize. This isn't financial advice, by the way, but rather it's a battle plan for your own financial survival. Number one, own real stuff. The most direct counter to a digital reset is owning things you can physically touch. We're talking about physical precious metals like gold and silver. There's a reason central banks in China, Russia, and India are stockpiling gold at the fastest rate in decades. After the US froze Russia's reserves in 2022, central banks worldwide realized their dollars could be frozen with a keystroke. Gold has no counterparty risk and can't be printed, devalued, or sanctioned. And you don't need mountains of it either. You can buy physical coins or small bars a little at a time. Number two, own your income. Stop just storing value and start creating it. This means owning a business. And it doesn't have to be the next Google. No, it can be a side hustle, a small local service, an online store, anything that generates cash flow that you control. You see, a business that provides a real service has pricing power. When the dollar's value drops, you can raise your prices. So you're no longer just a victim of inflation, you're actively fighting it or even benefiting from it. Number three, consider a different digital system. If they're building a digital system based on control, you can look at one based on decentralization. That's where something like Bitcoin comes in. It's a digital asset, but one with no central authority, no CEO, and no Federal Reserve that can print more of it into an oblivion. Now, it is incredibly volatile and risky still. It's less like an investment and more like strapping yourself to a financial roller coaster. But its key feature is that it operates outside their new programmable system. Number four, look abroad. If the US dollar is the currency being devalued, it makes sense to have some exposure to other economies. For an average person, the simplest way to do this is through funds that own companies outside of America. It's a way to diversify not just your assets, but your currency risk. So not all your eggs are in the US dollar's potentially leaky basket. And number five, own a piece of the earth. This means real estate. It's a classic hard asset. They can't print more land. It's real. It has utility. It's a powerful hedge. If you'd like some help with this, I uploaded some free information for you at frustratedinvestor.com. The point of all this is to have options, to not be trapped in a single system where someone else can change the rules on you overnight. And the truly absurd part of this whole thing is that the US government now spends more money paying the interest on its debt than it does on the entire national defense budget. I mean, we spend more servicing our credit card bill than we do on the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and Space Force combined. It's like finding out your grandpa is spending more on his Beanie Baby collection than on his heart medication. It's not just irresponsible. It's a sign that the people in charge have completely lost the plot.
If you've been grinding for deals and coming up empty, you're not alone. That's why we created a way for frustrated investors to finally get cash flowing income property without the hassle. Go to frustratedinvestor.com. And now, back to the show.
And look, let's be honest with each other for a moment. The American dream of homeownership is, at this point, less of a dream and more of a recurring low-grade anxiety nightmare. It's a 30-year contract you sign with yourself promising that you'll somehow remain employed, healthy, and not completely insane long enough to pay off a debt the size of a small nation's GDP. Because that's the deal, isn't it? That's the foundational promise of middle-class American life. You work hard, you make the payments, and in return, you build something of tangible value. You build equity. That's not just a number on a bank statement. It's your kid's college fund, your retirement plan, your emergency safety net. It's the largest single source of wealth for the majority of American families. And right now, across the country, American homeowners are sitting on a staggering $34.5 trillion in home equity. Because while you've been busy mowing the lawn and unclogging the gutters, a series of quiet, seemingly unrelated legislative changes have been bubbling up in the states that act as America's political test kitchens: Florida and Texas. And in this video, I'm going to show you how 3 new property statutes and insurance mandates being rolled out in those two states are not just isolated bad ideas. They are, I believe, the regional beta tests for a coordinated plan to systematically pry that equity out of your hands. This is the beginning of the great American equity reset. And before we go into the weeds, and the weeds are thick and full of snakes, we need to understand what you're actually buying when you buy a house. You're buying a set of legal superpowers lawyers call the bundle of rights. This includes your right to possess, control, exclude others from, enjoy, and dispose of your property. These aren't just nice ideas. They are protected by the Fifth Amendment. Remember that, because it's about to become painfully relevant. Home equity is the difference between what your house is worth and what you owe. It's the part you actually own. And for decades, that's exactly what people have used it for. They've tapped their equity to pay for home renovations, to consolidate high interest credit card debt, to fund a new business, or to have a financial cushion in case of a medical emergency. Tapping into your equity isn't inherently bad. It's a tool for financial mobility and stability. The problem arises when you are no longer choosing to use that tool, but are instead being forced to crack open that piggy bank for reasons that are completely outside of your control. And the amount of money sitting in those piggy banks is vast. States like Vermont have seen nearly 85% of their mortgaged homes become equity rich, with cities like San Jose at 68% and Los Angeles at 64%. This represents a massive, tempting pool of private wealth. And it seems some people have decided it's time for everyone to go for a swim. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. The risk that determines your insurance costs is no longer just about your proximity to a river. It's a complex algorithmic calculation based on hundreds of proprietary data points that you, the homeowner, will never, ever get to see. Insurance companies increasingly use AI and algorithmic models for property valuation, risk assessment, and premium calculation. The algorithms are proprietary and opaque. Homeowners cannot see what data is being used, so there's no way to challenge or appeal algorithmic decisions. It's a black box that can systematically increase financial pressure on hundreds of thousands of homeowners simultaneously, all without a single vote or public hearing. Which brings us to Florida. Florida is, for so many reasons, the perfect laboratory for a terrible new idea. It has a ton of coastline, a history of bizarre legislation, and an insurance market that is already perpetually on the verge of a nervous breakdown. At the center of this market is Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, the state-backed insurer of last resort. It was created to provide coverage for people who couldn't get it from private companies. It's supposed to be a safety net, but with around 769,000 policies currently on its books, down from a peak of 1.4 million in 2023, that safety net is now being repurposed into a dragnet. And here's what I mean. In December of 2022, the Florida legislature quietly passed a new law that forces Citizens policyholders to buy separate flood insurance coverage. The mandate rolls out in phases. Properties worth $600,000 or more, that all started in March of 2024. $500,000 or more by March 2025, that was this year. $400,000 or more by March 2026, and everyone else by 2027. But the crucial, absolutely infuriating catch is this mandate applies to you regardless of whether your property is in a FEMA designated flood zone. Even if you live on the highest point in the state, the majestic Britton Hill, which towers a whopping 345 feet above sea level, if you have a Citizens policy, you will be forced to buy flood insurance. This is the legislative equivalent of forcing everyone in Arizona to buy a snowmobile, just in case. So now, hundreds of thousands of Floridians are being forced to buy a new expensive insurance product. But how is the price determined? That's where this stops being merely incompetent and starts to feel genuinely sinister, because the value of your home, and therefore the risk you represent, is increasingly being decided not by a human being, but by a piece of software. Specifically, companies like Marshall and Swift, owned by the data giant CoreLogic. For nearly a century, their data on construction costs and property values has been the industry standard for insurance and real estate. They are the secret kingmakers of property valuation, creating a standardized, centralized, and virtually unchallengeable system for valuing property. This system is the engine behind what insurers call risk-based pricing. It sounds smart, it sounds fair, but in practice, it's a black box that can operate at immense scale. So let's connect the dots now. The state, using its power, creates a new, mandatory, and ever-increasing household cost. A cost that, for many, will amount to hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year. For homeowners already struggling with inflation and stagnant wages, where is that money going to come from? Well, there's only one place: the equity in their homes. This new expense is designed to force people into HELOCs, cash out refinances, or even more predatory products called home equity contracts, which the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau classified as predatory mortgage loans in January of this year. These target elderly homeowners facing insurance pressures, offering 40% upfront in exchange for 70% of their home's future value. You are being compelled to turn your long-term savings into a source of short-term liquidity just to pay off the insurance companies. Your nest egg is being systematically cracked open to make an omelet for someone else. And if you think this is just theory, because I read the comments below, and I know a lot of you think I'm some fear-mongering, lying crackpot, just look at the numbers. And I pinned them all in the top comment, by the way, for you to view yourself. In the last year, while homeowners in states like Rhode Island and New Jersey saw their home equity increase by over $36,000, homeowners in Florida saw their equity decrease by an average of $32,100. Florida is a massive outlier. The beta test is already getting results. The squeeze is on. The squeeze is working. 20% of Florida homeowners have simply dropped their coverage entirely, gambling on hurricane roulette rather than drain their equity to pay premiums that have increased 72% in 5 years. Which brings us to Texas. If Florida is the test case for applying financial pressure, Texas is the laboratory for building the legal and administrative infrastructure to manage the fallout. This is the second and arguably more insidious phase of the experiment. It all starts with something fundamentally important: local zoning laws. Zoning is the basic social contract that keeps our communities from descending into chaos. It's the set of rules that prevents someone from opening a slaughterhouse next to a kindergarten or a 24-hour nightclub next to a retirement home. It is the mechanism by which a community exercises its right of enjoyment, or at least it was. So this year, 2025, the Texas legislature passed a pair of bills, Senate Bills 840 and 15, that effectively took a bulldozer to local zoning authority across the state. These laws represent a direct assault on the homeowner's bundle of rights, and they do it under the guise of creating more affordable housing. In any of Texas's major cities, these laws now prohibit a municipality from stopping a developer from building high-density, multifamily housing in any area that is zoned for commercial use. So think strip malls, office parks, retail corridors. And to make sure there's no way for local communities to fight back, the law states that the approval process for these projects must be purely administrative. That means no city council meetings, no public comment periods, no community input whatsoever. If a developer's paperwork is in order, the city must approve it. The new laws say that cities cannot enforce density limits below 36 units per acre or height limits below 45 feet. This is the state legislature in Austin telling a quiet suburban neighborhood in Dallas that it has absolutely no right to object when a developer decides to build a 45-foot tall apartment complex right behind their backyard fence. So now, your property values are plummeting because your quiet street is now overshadowed by a giant new condo building. The construction has caused cracks in your foundation. Your peace and quiet, your right of enjoyment has been obliterated. Surely you can sue though, right? Meet the second piece of the Texas puzzle, Senate Bill 458. This law, also passed this year, mandates that for any dispute over the amount of loss on a residential property insurance claim, you no longer have an automatic right to your day in court. Instead, you are forced into a process called mandatory binding appraisal. Under this law, either you or your insurance company can unilaterally demand an appraisal to settle a dispute over the value of a claim. Each side picks an appraiser, and if they can't agree, they pick a neutral umpire to make the final call. And that decision is legally binding, except in the most extreme cases of fraud. This is a fundamental rewiring of the justice system. It replaces an open, adversarial legal process with discovery, depositions, and a jury of your peers with a closed administrative process governed by industry insiders. Your dispute will be settled not by a jury, but by the cold, impartial, and deeply biased logic of an algorithm designed to minimize payouts. So they've dismantled your property rights and neutered your ability to seek legal recourse. So what's left? Building the back-end infrastructure to track and manage all of it. And that brings us to the third piece of Texas legislation, Senate Bill 17. On its face, SB 17 is a law designed to restrict foreign ownership of Texas real estate. It prohibits governments, citizens, and companies from designated countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea from acquiring any interest in any real property in Texas. Now that sounds like a good thing. I'm down for that. But the true purpose of this law isn't about who it excludes. It's about what it requires. You see, in order to enforce a ban like this, the state must create a comprehensive, centralized system to vet, track, and monitor the ownership of every single property transaction. This is, by necessity, the creation of a massive state-level real estate database. It's the perfect tool for a government that wants to have a complete, real-time picture of who owns what and how much it's worth. So let's put it all together. This is the two-pronged attack of the Great Equity Reset. Florida is the financial pressure test. The playbook is simple. Use opaque, algorithmically determined risk to justify mandating a new expensive product like flood insurance. This creates a constant upward pressure on the cost of home ownership, forcing people to liquidate their long-term equity to cover short-term costs. Texas is the legal infrastructure test. First, use the pretext of affordable housing to pass laws that gut local zoning, destroying the right of enjoyment for existing homeowners and creating conflict. Second, remove the primary avenue for resolving those conflicts, the court system, and replace it with a binding, industry-friendly appraisal process. And third, build the state-level surveillance database needed to track and manage all of it. Look, I know this might sound paranoid, but people who warned that tech companies were building psychological profiles to manipulate behavior were called conspiracy theorists, until Facebook got caught doing exactly that. For 40 years, the government swore they weren't conducting secret medical experiments on citizens until the Tuskegee study was exposed. And in 2005, Michael Burry predicted the housing market would collapse, while Wall Street laughed at him, right up until millions lost their homes. And then Blackstone spent $10 billion buying those same foreclosed properties at bargain prices. So before you dismiss what I'm about to say, ask yourself, would you have believed any of those conspiracy theorists? Because this isn't about climate resilience, and it isn't about affordable housing. Could the real goal be to transform home equity, that $34.5 trillion sitting in your homes, from a stable, illiquid, long-term asset controlled by individual families into a liquid, accessible pool of capital for the financial and insurance markets? Look, this is not a done deal. These are regional beta tests. And while getting loud is one option, we can always fight back, we can always vote differently, that's not the only one. When you're facing a coordinated, systemic threat, sometimes the most effective move isn't to fight the machine head on. It's to make your assets as difficult to see, grab, and squeeze as possible. Think of this as the Jason Bourne approach to home ownership. Go off the grid, have a plan, and make yourself an unattractive target. So we can break this up into two phases. Phase one, put your house in witness protection with a trust. Transfer your home into a properly structured trust so you don't technically own it. A creditor can't take what isn't legally yours. It's not that expensive to set up, and it's one of the strongest shields available. So if you need a referral, check out my friends at freeentity.com to help you out. Then you can weaponize your HOA. Those Texas laws that override city zoning often can't override private agreements like HOA covenants. So if your HOA explicitly restricts multifamily dwellings, those rules can be legally binding even when the city's rules are nullified. And master the art of the appeal. Document everything. Hire competent, independent appraisers. Appeal your property tax assessment every single year. Make their algorithmic valuation a massive pain in the ass. And then phase two, unlock your equity before they do. Instead of waiting to be forced into a HELOC for surprise insurance bills, proactively tap your equity on your terms through home equity loans, HELOCs, or newer home equity agreements. RidgeLendingGroup.com is who I send my own family to for this. And diversify everything. Once you've unlocked equity, spread it across different asset classes, like REITs in other regions, or stocks, bonds, even gold. The goal is building a portfolio where a downturn in one area is offset by gains in another. And then play the tax game. In Florida, the Home Hardening Tax-Free Initiative provides sales tax exemptions on impact-resistant windows and reinforced doors, improvements that also lower insurance premiums. This is a fight for your financial future. It's less about changing the system and more about making yourself resilient enough to survive it. Your home isn't just shelter, it's your largest asset. It's time to start treating it like a fortress.
A lack of capital has killed a lot of dreams, but only for the people who don't know the loophole. If you have a 680 credit score or better and could use up to $150K at 0% to kickstart your next venture, get approval in 30 seconds or less, and you don't even have to talk to anyone at loopholelending.com.